I'm John Batchelor. This is the John Batchelor Show. Congressman Peter King, a one-day hearing on Capitol Hill recently. I'm sure you all remember the headlines. The subject was domestic radicalization of young people in America by Al-Qaeda or its kindred of Cain. Radicalization for self-destruction and murder, homicide. We've seen instances of this over the last years, chiefly influenced by people outside the United States sending attacks here, but also by questionable recruiting done somehow mysteriously inside our Muslim communities. It's a threat to parents. It was a threat in Europe when it was happening. In Britain, it's a threat here in the United States. Now the President of the United States has committed our military forces to supporting in some fashion, as yet undefined, a United Nations Security Council resolution against Libya. I raise that because I'm told at the meeting this afternoon between the President and members of Congress to explain his decision-making with regard to Libya, the question was asked, why are we going after Libya? The real threat is in Yemen, where we know Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula is headquartered, is in hiding, and in there are people who have already tried to kill Americans, chiefly a man by the name of Awlaki.
A disturbing new message from a radical Muslim cleric who is calling for the slaughter of Americans in a 23-minute video posted on his website. Anwar Awlaki says Americans are from, quote, the party of devils, and because of this, no special religious permission is needed to kill them. Awlaki also told followers it's either us or them. U.S. intelligence has linked him to the 9/11 hijackers, the underwear bomber, and the accused Fort Hood gunman. The American-born cleric is believed to be hiding in Yemen.
A so-called imam, a radical imam, who is an American, was born in New Mexico, educated in Colorado, and uses his language skills and his preaching on the internet to convince and cajole and recruit killers. Hassan, the Fort Hood killer, we believe was recruited or in some way influenced by Awlaki, and I could go down the list, but I'm joined now by a man who's very expert in this, Sebastian Gorka, my colleague of the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. Seb, a very good evening to you. Why not Yemen? Why not Awlaki? Awlaki's not in Libya. He's in the outreaches of Lebanon.
Well, good evening, John. That is the really important question here, and one doesn't have to be a proponent of Machiavelli to ask a very simple question. Gaddafi is a dictator. He's a nasty piece of work. His hands are bloodied by supporting terrorism over the decades. But the fact is, why are we going to become involved in a Libya when, in fact, what we have in President Saleh and Yemen is perhaps the most important breeding ground for U.S. targeting by terrorists of U.S. National interests outside of Al-Qaeda Central in the Fatah. We have a country where, if you take simply the bare statistics, the fact that Yemen comes third in terms of the number of individuals of Yemeni citizenship who have been involved in central Al-Qaeda plots against the United States in the last 10 years. And if you prorate that to the size of the population, it jumps up to the most influential recruiting ground for terrorists. Secondly, as you mentioned, Awlaki, who is behind Al-Qaeda's English language terrorism internet magazine called Inspire, has gone on record saying that he counts among his students, quote unquote, both Muttalib, the Christmas Day bomber, and Major Hassan, responsible for the massacre at Fort Hood. So Yemen, it is or should be a priority for the United States in the global fight against Al-Qaeda.
At the same time, in your piece in The Hill addresses this, Peter King's hearings are meant to be a discovery process as to how young people in the United States, and there are many more communities here that are Muslim, and I'm thinking of the one from Somalia especially because it's been troubled by disappearing young people who are in Somalia or elsewhere, or are other places who are radicalized and used recruited for al-Shabaab in the fighting in Somalia, how al-Awlaki has been targeting them and people like him on the Internet. And that is the question for Mr. King, and it's the question for you too, Seb. Are we vulnerable? Is our Internet vulnerable to recruiting by people who imitate al-Awlaki?
Well, the argument I made in the piece for The Hill is that if you simply look at the statistics, the facts of the last 9.5 years of the war on terror, you have to give credit to the American counterterrorist system under the Bush administration and today in doing one very good thing. It is very difficult today for Al-Qaeda Central to execute mass casualty attacks on the mainland of this great country using foreign nationals. The measures we have put in place, the intelligence screening and the various initiatives that have been taken since September 11th means that Al-Qaeda really has to refocus its recruiting to Muslims who are already here physically in the United States and primarily to U.S. citizens. That is why it has, for example, started to publish this English language how-to magazine of building, literally, one of the articles was how to build a bomb in your mother's kitchen. They can't get 19 hijackers into the country the way they did with legal visas as they did on September the 11th. So now it's the domestic homegrown threat, and that's why the King hearings are so very, very apposite.